Hey guys, BAKD here. In today's video, I'm going to show you a pretty fun build. It is my Whirlwind triple shout build. It's pretty cookie cutter, but I'm going to show you 3 different ways you can adjust this build to your likings. It's a lot of fun whirlwinding around. I'm going to show you the expertise, how to snapshot the whirlwind. This build absolutely dominates Lilith. Especially I'm level 85, and if you have a character level 100, you probably can beat Lilith with this build until Berserk Ripping gets nerfed. But yeah, this is a pretty cool build, and I'm going to show you every aspect to it, how I have it built, and yeah, we'll just get right into it. Alright, so we are going to start off with our skills and how I like this build made up. So we have triple shout, I do war cry, rallying cry, challenging shout, and then for any downtime on berserking, I use Wrath of Berserker. This substantially increases your DPS, but if you're pushing higher tiered sigils, you probably want to go with Iron Skin or something else there. But Wrath of the Berserker is very good. Lunging strikes. To get berserking when it does drop, you can come out of your whirlwind and pop that. And then of course whirlwind we want as high as possible. And let's go over our skill tree. So it's pretty cookie cutter how you have this built, but you have lunging strike all the way up to the berserking for 1.5 seconds. This helps you maintain your berserking. Whirlwind all the way up to the bleed damage. We are going to hone down on as much bleed damage as possible with this build. There are a few different ways you can build this, but I think bleed is a lot of fun. You pretty much nuke people's HP down. We want to do pressure point. A lot of times vulnerable will drop off, and this will help it stay up and do substantial damage to them. We don't have too much vulnerable damage, but we have enough to do enough for pressure point to be good. We don't need anything else on that tier. Coming down to this one, we want Rallying Cry. I only have 1 point in Rallying Cry and Challenging Shout, so the other points go to better places in my opinion. We get Unstoppable while Rallying Cry is active. And then we get additional fury generation and resource generation. So that's very good. We have challenging shout. This is going to be our big damage mitigation, and we can stack this with iron skin if you're pushing higher tier sigils. I think this build can go up to 20 to 30 levels above where I'm at, and I'm sure I showed you the clip just a minute ago. But it's a lot of fun seeing things explode, get bleed damage, yada yada yada. But we want to do challenging shout, gives bonus life. And then I also did the gain 3 fury each time you take damage, which is good. This will pretty much keep your fury capped. It's not really needed too much, but this one's kind of worthless. Give thorns equal to 30% your maximum life, so that's whatever. Coming down here, we have 1 point in Rallying Cry. This is good if you have more points in it because it gives you a bigger damage multiplier the higher that goes up. But 1 point is fine. Berserking for 4 seconds. And then when 6 enemies are nearby, the 10x damage multiplier is pretty big. If you're having problems with Fortify, this is definitely good as well. So if you're pushing higher tier dungeons, potentially going with Mighty Warcry is better. We want to max out our booming voice, increased shout time. I have 2 points in Guttural Yell, which I'd prefer to have 1 more in that, but you get more benefit off putting them all into aggressive resistance here because you're going to pretty much be berserking 100% of the time. But these 2 are a good damage mitigation. The shouts also heal you for 1%. That's good to keep you topped up. Just 1 point in that. We want as much movement speed as we can. We need to snapshot our whirlwind, and I'll show you how to snapshot that in just a little bit here, but You want to be moving through enemies as fast as possible and blowing them up. Coming down here while berserking, which we're pretty much going to be 100% uptime or close to it, we want the Fury generation. Coming down to our next tier, we want 1 point in hamstring, which gives everybody a crowd control effect. But we are doubling down on cut to the bone, so we have 3 points in it for the 30x multiplier to vulnerable enemies. That pairs very nicely with this up here. If you don't have this for some reason, you want to do less points in this, and you want to potentially go for heavy-handed is very good because it gives a huge critical damage increase. But between these two, I think heavy-handed or cut to the bone will work. My amulet has 3 points on that to just double down on that damage. For Pit Fighter, it gives you damage reduction. You want that maxed out, and you need as much crit strike chance as possible to allow your Barber Gem, which we'll go into that in a bit, to proc as much as possible. Coming down here, we want 1 point in Thick Skin, and then 3 points in the damage multiplier. Stacking damage multipliers is going to do a ton of damage if you do it right. If you're really having trouble dying, you can move 2 points like that to keep your Fortify up, but I have no Fortify gear right now. And I'll show you a few different aspects you can get Fortify and how I keep it up. But for now, I'm going to do the damage. Coming down to the bottom, 100%, you need 3 out of 3 heavy-handed. This is like 50 crit strike damage or so if you look in the stats, but that is absolutely huge. You need that. Like I was saying, amulet, cut to the bone, or heavy-handed will work just fine. Now, I do have Wrath of the Berserker. Sometimes my berserking does drop if I don't get the proper lucky hit, or I don't have my shouts up for some reason. So this is a good filler and a huge damage multiplier every 50 Fury, so every technically 3 seconds I get a huge damage multiplier and get berserking. That keeps the damage and movement speed. So I think this is a good filler, but if you didn't want this, or you're pushing heavier or higher tier dungeons, I would potentially go with Iron Skin. And I would go, you can do Fortify if you're having trouble fortifying, but heal for 10% of the barrier is good to keep you topped up. But I'm going to remove that because I like my berserking more and the damage. And for our key passive, Unbridled Rage is pretty good, but for this one we are doubling down on the bleed damage. When you cause an enemy to bleed, you have a chance equal to your critical strike chance to increase the bleed amount by 110% of your critical strike damage. That's confusing as all hell. You overpower occasionally, but you really want to double down on the bleeds, and it absolutely shreds people. So it's a lot of fun. This build is cool, and if you built it properly with the right gear and glyphs, it will be a lot of fun, especially at level 100. Alright, let's go into our gear now. Now, we're going to start off on the stats. Now, all the stats are pretty typical for every build, how you want to do it. But up top, you need cooldown reduction. You can do armor, life, and whatever you want on your third one. Life on kill is pretty good because you're killing a lot of things and you're going to be topping yourself up. Now for the imprinted aspect on the helmet, I would go with your armor, your disobedience. You're going to be hitting a lot of things at once and it'll keep your armor way up there. So on the gloves and the chest, I would 100% put this aspect. It's Relentless Berserker on your gloves, because on my gloves right now it says direct damage against bleeding enemies has a 30% chance to stun, and I feel like it barely ever stuns. But on your chest, Right now I have the damage with the core skill, has a chance to extend berserking. If this is a 40%, you'll pretty much have 100% berserking if you have good lucky hit. And this is pretty key to this build, is having good lucky hit to extend the berserking as much as possible. But this aspect is going to go on the gloves. And for the chest, you have 3 different options I would recommend. First one is going to be at maximum fury. You're going to generate fortify. If you have a max roll on that, that's going to keep your fortify topped up all the time. This will pretty much fix your fortify problem. If you're going with iron skin instead of Wrath of the Berserker, I would 100% stick this on there. Iron skin gives you damage reduction and unstoppable. This is very, very strong for endgame stuff. So if you swap that out, I would pop that on the chest or the fortify. And for the third option, basic skills grant a 20% DR for 5 seconds, 5 to 6. The only problem with this is sometimes you're whirlwinding longer than 6 seconds, and you can pop out and refresh it if you want. But I get less usage out of this than I would out of the gain 4% DR for each nearby bleeding enemy. Even if it's only 1 bleeding enemy, you get 4 all the way up to 20%. So this is very good over the 20% DR. But you can stick that on the chest as well. Going into our gloves, you want lucky hit, crit chance, and then you need max whirlwind. I'm only 3 out of 4. Unfortunately, I could be doing more damage, but this is as good as it gets. Critical strike against injured enemies is good. All stats. Really, that 4th attribute is your choice. Now, legs, damage reduction of any kind. Damage reduction while fortified is good if you have the fortified aspect on your chest. Maximum life. DR while close. DR while bleeding is a very good synergy for this build just because everything's going to be bleeding. And then that aspect for the bleeding enemies is good. Coming down to the boots, you want movement speed as high as possible. Berserk duration. Technically, you don't need fury cost reduction, but that is very good. And fortified generation, damage reduction while injured. Really whatever you want on the boots, but you need movement speed and berserk duration there. That's pretty key. For the aspect, I found that critical strikes give you movement speed is much better than anything else that I found. You can do the one that stuns people, but having the unstoppable, that's not very good. What else can we put on there? Nope. And there's one other one you could do, and it's Whirlwind drags enemies in closer on occasion, but I feel like the movement speed is much better for this build. You want evade charges or movement speed when you evade, just so you can get to the next pack faster and faster. To be honest, you're not going to be evading so much, so maybe the evade gives you resource, evade gives you movement speed is going to be best for this. We're going to go to our jewelry now. I have cut to the bone on this. The best in-slot neck affixes, I would say, is a +3 ranks, berserk duration, movement speed, and then for that last one, the DR is good for pushing higher tier, but cooldown reduction pretty much gives you 100% uptime of these, especially paired with Wrath of the Berserker, fills in that slot. For the legendary affix on this, Whirlwind critical strike chance is increased by 12% all the way to 36%. This is going to give you a 70 to 80% crit strike. If you have good crit, which I'm 38% on top of the 36, and then I have a 8% in the skill tree or something like that. So that is absolutely huge. That paired with the Barber, you want as many crit strikes as you can, especially paired with the bleed damage, is going to make things explode very often and very fast. So that's pretty key to put on your necklace. I probably wouldn't recommend anything else on there, but you can choose from there. For the Brutal Heart, I did the suppression of incoming damage and also explodes there. So a blue socket on the necklace is good. The second one, I would probably prefer a red socket on it, but this is as good as it gets. Technically, you don't need resource generation, so it'd go all DPS. You could go vulnerable damage, crit strike chance, and the last option is dealer's choice, fury, resource gen, damage to close, really anything you want on there. DR, actually I don't think DR can be on there, but life would be very good on this. For the imprinted aspect is key to have the max roll of fury per second while berserking. You're pretty much always going to be berserking, and it's going to keep you topped up. That's the only fury generator that you really need on this build, so it's key to have that. I have the blue socket on here, so I have the 4 seconds of immune when I lose a bunch of health. That's pretty good for pushing higher tiers so you don't get one-shotted all the time, but I think a red socket would be good there, and I'll put that in the planner, and you can choose what you want. But that's really dealer's choice on that one. You need to have the suppressed incoming damage. Same thing with this ring. Crit strike chance, lucky hit, crit strike damage, vulnerable damage, fury, resource gen, really whatever you want on there. But it is key to have on your second ring, whenever you cast a shout skill, its cooldown is reduced by 1.7 seconds per nearby enemy, all the way up to 6 seconds. So that's pretty key. The Wrathful Heart I have in there is the Barber, by far the best one in the game. I think the 2-second Barber may be pretty strong with this build. I only have a 3.1 available, and I haven't really got to swap them and try, but really any second of the Barber is going to do for you, so just slot that baby in there. But just remember the aspects on those. All of these are key to making the synergy on this build good. One thing you can swap for the gloves, which is a huge DPS decrease, but it's a lot of fun, is you can do Gore's Devastating Grips. Gives a lucky hit chance, attack speed that's worthless, and Whirlwind, but the passive on it explodes every 2 seconds, dealing base damage as fire. It's pretty cool seeing things explode. It doesn't do too much damage, but it's fun to slot on there. The gloves are really just the affix on them. I thought they'd be good, but you're really not stunning things that often. So remember to swap this build onto the gloves and then go on from there. So going into the weaponry, we are going to go with all swords on this build. The two-handed sword is key on how you build this. But you want crit strike damage, vulnerable damage, damage to close or damage to core, and then all stats. All stats is there so you can meet your Paragon board. I have strength on this, unfortunately, and you'll see that I'm missing a few things. Now, right now, Berserk Ripping is absolutely busted, but even if they fix it, this is going to be key to this build to make everything bleed. Direct damage, I verified, while Berserking is your Whirlwind. So yeah, that's going to be on your two-hand. For the other two-hand, we're going to do Limitless Rage, which is a 4x all the way up to 60x based on your Fury. Same stats. All stats, vulnerable, crit, close. For this build, your mace is the stat stick. You're not going to be using it at all. So any item power on that is fine. But Limitless Rage and Berserk Ripping on your two hands. For our one hands, we are going to do Expectant, or whatever it is, your basic skills. Increase the damage of your next core skill by 10%. So you want a 3 basic attack, so 3 lunging strikes to snapshot into your Whirlwind. Same with Limitless Rage. These two are going to be your snapshotting key. Same thing, all stats, core, close, and then vulnerable and crit damage. On the second one, you're pretty much always going to be topped up, or at least close, so this is going to be a huge damage multiplier, but you want to do Edge Masters, the highest roll possible, and you get the additional benefit when higher Fury. So yeah, that is all of the weapons and how I would have it set up. For the gems, the sapphires pair very well if you have a fortify all the time, but you get a DR while fortified. Seems to be much better than sticking rubies for HP or topazes when you get CC'd. You're pretty much always going to have an uptime of unstoppable or a break out of it, so I think the sapphires are going to be much better end game. We went over the malignant hearts and the jewelry, but I'm going to mark this on the video. You want the suppression, incoming damage. You potentially want a red socket, but I have the immune so you don't get one shot. And then barber in the ring. For the gems in the weapons, typically crit strike damage to vulnerable is what you want for the highest damage multiplier possible. If you do not have the vulnerable damage right here with a decent lucky hit rate, I would swap those to sapphires. That's going to be damage while CC'd. Doesn't show me on here, but damage while CC'd, and people are going to be CC'd all the time pretty much, so that's a good one, but this is how I would have it set up. So that is all of my gear, how you have to have this built, what you would swap around, and now we're going to get into the Paragon board, which I will have a full planner on this. There are a few keys to this, but we'll just kind of get into it. I'm going to go over what I chose, what you can choose, but yeah. Alright, so going to the weapons, we only have two damaging abilities pretty much, Lunging Strike and Whirlwind. You can Lunging Strike with two swords much faster than you can with a two-hand, and we're not spec'd into two-hand, so I would always put a two one-hand swords on there. You can potentially do like axes or maces, but I think the best option is going to be your blades. For the Whirlwind, you want the two-handed sword on there, and the reason behind that is two-handed swords cause bleed damage over 5 seconds, so you always want that enabled. And then for your weapon mastery, to give the additional bonus, you want a 15x increased damage to vulnerable enemies. I probably wouldn't recommend anything else but the two-hand sword expertise. For this build to work properly, you need a two-handed sword there with the highest item power possible. The two swords are going to be stat sticks along with the mace there. You're not going to be using it at all. Alright, so now we're in the Paragon board. I'm going to show you my thinking behind all of this. Now, there are two key glyphs that you're going to need to make this work. Now, the first one is going to be Martial. You need this for your uptime on your shouts. Pretty much the additional 1.2 seconds is going to be huge, and it's kind of hard to meet the 40 strength if you're lower level, but Martial is key. Exploit is very good for this, just because you will be making things vulnerable and usually killing them before 3 seconds, or you'll have that ability that core abilities give more vulnerable, so you need that uptime. And the last one is going to be Mortal Draw, which I think I have in this board. Damage with skills that swap to new weapons. This is going to be key for snapshotting with those legendary affixes I was talking about. You want to hit 3 times with your single weapon, and then you want to Whirlwind. It's going to give a 100% boost to your abilities, and you get that 18% critical strike possibility, which brings you upwards to about 100% crit while you're snapshotted into that whirlwind. But coming down here, you can kind of just follow this on the planner if you want. I kind of just went all over the place, but my first glyph is exploit. I got that first for the vulnerable. When you're lower level, you really can't apply this very often. We got both of the rare nodes, and we followed it up here. You're trying to get as much fury as possible, and you get life. So the Warbringer board is your first choice. This is the first board you get because you need to get this fury. Every 75 fury you get 12% as fortify. This is one of your only fortify generators, unless you have that legendary power on like your chest or wherever you put it, to boost that fortify chance. For the glyph on the Warbringer board, we are going to do the Mortal Draw, of course. This is a huge damage thing, so get that on there. You can kind of just follow these around. We got more Fury, Fury on kill, all that good stuff. That was on the way to get Warbringer. For our second board, this board is the Flawless Techniques. You really don't want any one-hand stuff, but I got a few on the way just because I can. This one is very good for this spot. Martial gets you 40 strength if it's level 15. So I got the bottom here for the 10 strength, up top for the 10 strength, and getting DR nodes from close as much as possible there. This is really going to stack up and benefit you in the end game. But we want that shout skill cooldown reduction. And then you'll kind of see, you can follow me around there. We can probably, yep, we got to keep that strength node, but you'll see everything that I hit Havoc crit strike damage is huge. Coming down to our third or fourth board, you'll see how I followed it down. Berserk duration, berserk damage, but this is going to be the Carnage board. We really don't need attack speed with Whirlwind, so we don't want that node. But for this glyph slot, I went with Territorial. This is pretty big because you get a close damage modifier added on, and you get DR from close. We got some more close damage roll berserking, all that good stuff, so follow that around. And for the last board I have is the Flayer board. We're going to follow this up, get DR from bleeding enemies. This is pretty big. If you get all stats on all of your items, you get that additional bonus for more DR from bleeding, and we're going to make everything bleeding. So this board is big. The hemorrhage board, I mean. So hemorrhage is pretty good if they're bleeding for more than 3 seconds. Usually they're not, but we're probably not going to go for that node. For this one, I went with Wrath. I haven't quite got this maxed. The critical strike generates 3 fury. You'll pretty much always be maxed with this, but I'm already maxed in the first place. So the other glyph I had in that place, which the crit strike damage is pretty big, I did this one to push higher tier dungeons. You get a damage modifier while berserking. You're going to be berserking all the time. And you get DR from elites, which is pretty nice. So your choice there, but you want to try to unlock that as fast as possible. It's going to be upwards to level 90 where you start unlocking this glyph slot. And then if you go one more board, which I'm 100% going to have Wrath in there. On Undaunted is good if you have a legendary affix that gives you Fortify. Keep that up all the time. But Wrath for damage, Undaunted for DR. So for pushing higher end stuff on this last board. So hopefully you guys understood this. You can look back in my build planner and see everything built here. But that's how I have the Paragon board set up. everything that I've done in this build is 100% synergized with all of the other legendary affix, the Paragon Board, the expertise. This is a pretty cookie cutter build, but this is how I would do it if you want to do a fun exploding whirlwind build. If you guys have any questions, concerns, what you did differently in this build, leave it in the comment. But yeah, that's going to be it, and I will see you on the next one. Peace. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to snapshot a whirlwind. It's pretty simple. Going off of the, let's see right here, basic attacks give you a 30x multiplier when you hit them 3 times. I also have this, when you're at maximum fury, you get up to 60x damage. So initially you can use some of your shouts if you want, but you want to hit 1, 2, 3. I'm pretty much snapshotted, and now I can start whirlwinding. You don't want to take whirlwind off because you'll lose that damage multiplier. But when you stop, you lose all the multipliers. And when you, let's say you start whirlwinding and you Wrath of the Berserker, it takes you out. So you want to hit 1, 2, 3, usually 3 times, and then you start whirlwinding again. The other shouts you can use while you're whirlwinding to keep up the damage. This is a fairly easy, only 109 for level 55 sigils, so this dungeon's pretty easy, but the other ones I've done, I think upwards to level 68 sigils with this build. And it is kind of dicey. The DR is definitely needed, but that's why I feel like the DR while bleeding is best, but you can go with that other one I was talking about before. So either Iron Skin if you choose to swap out Wrath of the Berserker, or you can go for the basic skills, give DR. But this does drop off quite a bit because you usually are whirlwinding longer than 5 seconds. So that's why I feel like you get more use out of the 20x for bleeding there.